you are surrounded, you out there, you're surrounded by all these traditions that you grew up with, and stories and legends and metaphors and stories and beliefs and all these things that we grew up around in modern culture. Doesn't matter which part of the world, but the remains of ancient cultures and ancient stories and different paths throughout history. The remains of them stayed, and you get to grow up around them. And what I'm scared about is that you cannot enjoy them. You cannot enjoy the possibilities that are hidden inside this. And the key is how to think about them and how to approach all these traditions and all stuff. And I'll get into a lot of examples in these videos. And but what I want to kind of prompt my video is about that. A lot of my videos about is how are you as a sensitive being that maybe is also a space holder that actively hold the spaces that you want to see in the world, but maybe just a sensitive being going about in the world, and you look for something that is a little bit different than the modern culture, than the game that was laid out before you. Maybe you experienced enough of that, you played enough, and you're looking for something else. You're a seeker, the way Osho talks about it. So if that's you, my videos, this flies here, if that's you, my videos are really here to empower you. This is my purpose, okay? Because I'm like that, and I would want to hear about these things during different stages in my self-development path, in my transformational path, in just growing up, even as a kid. I would love to hear about these things, and I actually feel sad that kids these days are fed with all the nonsense in school, all these like stories. And maybe that's a good place to start the actual examples from. Like, they are fed with all these stories that don't mean anything. They don't have anything that the kids can take and empower themselves, or can build an inner structure for kids. So I'll jump for a second to the end. And people that come to our workshops that are very radical, like transformational workshops, that you get to really go in and feel deeply inside yourself. It's not about any like spiritual theory or philosophy or anything like this. We don't care about what you believe in. Actually, better if you don't. But it's like you go really deep inside yourself. That's why it's so transformational. If you really go deep inside yourself, and I'm sure you had these experiences in your life. Maybe it was this night where you stayed up all night and you kind of thought about your life and reminisce, and maybe you did like this meditation or deep contemplation. You went really deep, and you found out something about yourself. You transformed. You never stay the same since that night. So it's like that. So our workshops are very transformational, and people that come to our workshop, a lot of the time, what they also get to enjoy is the inner structure. That a lot of our work requires an inner structure. One of the things in the inner structure is, for example, to not believe anything someone tells you, to not to take what we tell you as a philosophy or a theory. Also, to have the inner structure to, stay centered in your life, stay centered in what you're doing, have the different voices in you to examine things, have also outer structure, like have a friend group, have like some social circle that can be in your team during all this transformation. Like, it's not about like plucking you and putting you in this like different world. It's really about you like a tree, like slowly growing and developing while transforming. So it's meant to be like a very joyful path, like a very nice path. So for that, you need a lot of inner structure. to walk this path in a very great way. Like, for example, you can think about people, I don't know why it comes like business. Some people, they come for a very steady business. Maybe they work in their father, like Gary Vee, for example, worked in their father shop for 30 years, right? Let me just check something. Great, 8 minutes in. So, and he got to work for, I don't know, not 30 years. Really, he worked all his youth in his father work until he was like in the 30s, and then he got a really steady background in business entrepreneurship, and then when he went to do business, and he is very centered in his work. He know how to prioritize things. He's not making a big deal about money. He's really in it for, that's what he says, at least, like he's in it for the game. He's really in it for the journey. So the same thing in this kind of work, with this transformational work, you need a really great inner structure. And because during our lives, since we were kids, all we were bombarded with in modern culture is just bullshit stories, fairy tales that don't have any moral story, any line to them. We end up with like not a very strong inner structure. And yes, probably you already have the different example where you did have, maybe you had like these great parents that build inner structure in you, or maybe you had great mentors, and maybe like you had this youth council, or this person in your school that was like a role model, or maybe you had this experience of having. But in general, in society, in modern culture, we're bombarded with bullshit that doesn't build inner structure. And I think it's on purpose, because if you don't have inner structure, you just end up being a good consumer and buying whatever these corporations sell you. So you're like a machine that serves, like a screw in the machine. But if you have a strong inner structure, one day you're going to learn about anger, hopefully sooner or later, and then you'll be like, no. You're going to have stronger boundaries. You're going to have a stronger center to not buy anything someone sells you. Right? And we're missing this. And what I doing this video for is for you to look at the things around you and learn to find the gold in them. Okay, right now we're out here in the desert, and there's all these beautiful pools of sweet water here. And I didn't know there even exists. And I'm from here. I'm traveling here all the time. And I just found them a few months ago. So, I found other ones during my history. not to beat myself up here. But, sometimes you need to find the sweet water in the desert. So in modern culture, it's kind of this desert, but there is sweet water. And the key is how do you look at those traditions, the things that you are soaked in. Like you take a biscuit in the tea and you soak it in. You are soaked in all this modern culture tea, but out of that, how you can harvest some fruits right now. So let's start. First example is like you grew up with religion, right? I don't know. It's probably Christianity, maybe, Muslim, but if you're also watching my YouTube, maybe you're Jewish also. So you grew up with these traditions. Now, one option is to look at all these things, all these religions, as like a belief system. And this not worth almost anything. Like the best you can get out of it is to have the experience of how it is to be part of a community. Like if you grew around like a Christian community and people were nice there and it was like a nice close community, then great, you got the gold of living in some kind of community. Maybe it still was an ordinary community and probably there was a lot of fucked up things there. It doesn't matter, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, Hindu. But that something about religion creates these little communities that have some gold in them. So this is one thing that you can take out of that. But another thing you can take, and if you want to harvest a little bit more gold, is you can look at these religion as game worlds. What is a game world? It's a group of people that has certain context. Certain context, it means that they have a certain set of rules of engagement, certain set of principles. Now, a lot of these things are usually unconscious. Like a lot of the times, either unconscious is like they tell you, you need to believe in Jesus to be part of us. Like something like that, and that is unconscious in itself, because what's the purpose of you to believe in things? Like instead of exploring yourself, instead of discovering, finding out, going on a journey, they want you, no, you believe the priest because he told you, you believe your parents. Like that is unconscious of itself. Like the purpose is not so bright. But maybe it was just, maybe they weren't aware of the possibility in looking in things as a game world, and they have like this context that is just like, what do you mean I go to church? What do you mean that's what you do on Sunday? Or like, what do you mean you eat matzah? There's holidays. You just celebrate the holidays. What do you mean why? Like, they don't look for the purpose. That's an unconscious context. But all these religions, they have context, and this group of people, right, is a very large group of people. So it's really large game worlds. This is what we call a game world. Okay? So all these game worlds, all these religions, they have a certain context. If you look at that as a game world, you can start looking at the context, and you can start understanding different things about the context. For example, you can start asking yourself, like, why did they cut everyone's penises off? Like, what is this circumcision thing? Or why do they meet why they don't work on Saturday? For example, this is a great example. Like at the beginning, you can think, oh, don't work on Saturday. Of course, that's what you do. It's just tradition. And that remains unconscious. But if you want to harvest some gold out of this, you experiment and you be like, okay, Saturday I don't work. What it creates inside of me. And you take it as an experiment. You say, oh, these people have this game world, and I can do an experiment with what they're doing and see how it is. And you experiment with not working in Saturday, and then you realize, oh, that makes me not a slave. And actually, even the slaves didn't work on Saturday. So they were not really slaves. They were more part of the family in that context, the Jewish context. But it's like, if I don't work one day, I have some time for space for myself to see what is more in life. What is there more in life than just working? You discover something. You harvest some gold, right? This is going to be a tough video because it's basically me standing here and talking the whole time. Then, okay, now you have one piece of gold that you find because you did an experiment about the context. You didn't take the context at face value. You kind of dig in to what it is if it's a game world. So you think about the game world, or you think about these things in a different way. Another way, for example, is to take a fairy tale. You take like I don't know why I'm thinking about The Princess Bride, which is a movie. But even that, you can take a movie and think, what is the context of it? What is the person that invented or wrote this movie or this script or story, what did they wanted to tell me? And then you start to examine the distinctions that you have in your life in front of that story. For example, Princess Bride, if you haven't watched this movie, go watch the movie. You've seen these guys like chasing the bride. And, you can think about it in terms of, for example, one thing that we work with is your center, to find your energetic center. And you can think this guy that is chasing after the princess is giving her his center. And you can take this distinction, but then you can look a little bit deeper, and maybe you can watch it with a group of people, and then someone says, but actually he doesn't give her his center, he's going on this archetypal mission to rescue her. But wait, being a rescuer, I'm talking about all these distinctions that we have in our work. It's like, being a rescuer, he's doing like this slow drama. Why is he trying to rescue her from her problems that she created? And then someone would say, but maybe they have archetypal love, So you can go about this and stop being hypnotized by the thing in face value and start looking at what are the distinctions behind it. You start to understand the purpose of this video. what I propose to you to do is to stop looking at things the way they are. Stories, religions, all these things that are around you, like even corporation. Look at the one corporation, like look at Google, and start to see what are the distinctions, like how it was become so strong, like how this corporation succeeded so much. What were the distinction in the core that worked for them? Maybe it was just a group of manipulative people that just seek for power and succeeded in modern culture. That is possible, but even if it's this shadow thing, you can still look at it and see, okay, how is it this shadow principle come across all of modern culture? Like maybe they bought all the competition and just destroyed all their competition. And then you can start looking at this in modern culture, and then you think, one day I'm going to start a game world. And how would I overcome that? And you can look at anything like this. Let's think, for example, what do you have around you that you grew up with? We talked about religion that you might grow up with. So these, you look at game worlds as game worlds. You have all these stories and legends and movies that you can look at like this. What were the distinction for them? Like I really encourage you, for example, to go and watch The Alchemist. Read The Alchemist again, this movie, this book. What's going on with me? Damn it, not centered. So go read The Alchemist and see what are the distinctions behind this book again. Instead of getting sucked into the story, see, okay, how does the guy in The Alchemist, this young shepherd, how does he make decisions? What is in him, in his inner structure when he makes these decisions? And then you can follow to the author and see what are the distinctions the author have. And for example, the 4 Agreements, like that's a famous self-development book. So they tell you don't take anything personal. Okay, you can take it at face value, the theory, okay, I'm going to stop taking things personal. Maybe you can even experiment with that. But then you look deeper, it's like, what's behind that? Why do not take things personal? Because the author doesn't want you to get hooked. But the author doesn't have the distinction about getting hooked and how to unhook yourself, how to stop being reactive, how to not be adaptable, how to be in your center. So the author doesn't know about how to talk about these things, so he just tells you don't take it personal. But how deep not taking something personal gets you? Like, I want to be personal with my clients. I want to be personal and care about the people in my life, right? So there's different distinctions behind these messages. Okay, so we talked about like religion, books, like all these stories. What else you have? You have the people in your life, your mentors, your community, your family, your tribe, whatever that is you have in your life, even your boss, your people at work. What motivates them? What is the thoughtware that they used to think with? What are the distinctions behind that? So if you go every day to work, because you have to right now, that's your stage in your adventure, you're getting some money to go travel, how is the people in your work? How you can look at them and see the distinctions behind what they're doing? That can get your day flying, instead of getting a boring day in front of the computer. Like, you're starting to think about distinctions, how things work. You start to look at the thoughtware behind things. And this is where you start harvesting the gold. This is why when I, for example, start to look at at all the Jewish tradition and all these rabbis, and I stop listening to, the ones that I'm listening now, they tell you like the Jewish thing is not a religion. You shouldn't take it as a religion. Start to go inside, look what it is for you, blah, blah, blah. But even them, I'm like looking behind that and I'm seeing what is the distinction that they're using. What can I harvest this as gold from my life? And this is open up a new dimension of life. Like before that, I had this life that are happening to me, like someone is dragging me through the sand here. But then when I started to look at what's behind things, I could stay in my center and stand and not getting dragged, just going on a trip. So I can be in modern culture. I'm not allergic to it or anything. I can be with people, I can listen to everything, I can read everything, you know, except these very scarring things. Like there are some movies that are really scarring, you know, so don't watch them. But, you know, I can go around life standing in my center and just looking and being in my center, being in my energetic bubble, and seeing different traditions, seeing different people with their belief system, with this craziness that they're coming, and like, look what's behind it. You know, look, what are the distinctions that they're using? What are they missing? You know, if they're missing something big and they're open-minded, maybe they can become your clients. You know, maybe it's something that you can learn from and you become their client. Maybe you're in the same place in life and you can walk together a bit and explore together and experiment together. You know, so I encourage you to give you the bottom line. I encourage you to take from this video is to start looking at religions, belief system theories, even all the NLP stuff, you know, human design, instead of like taking that in face value and thinking, oh, I discover now that I'm a projector. All these limitations are now on me. This is how I should do things. Look behind it. What does it mean that you're a projector? What is the distinction that they're using to tell you that? Like 5 bodies, 4 bodies? Is the intellectual thing everything in their, you know, in this religion called human design? You know, do they believe their own beliefs? Like, do they really believe their own stories? You know, so you start going deeper in everything, in self-development, self-transformation, any kind of work, any kind of book. You know, stay centered in the way you think about things. Start harvesting the gold. If you're there anyway, you might as well do it. But also, what you can do is you can, you know, turn to the place that actually nourishes you. The place that you can really get these distinctions. Maybe they don't tell you to believe in anything. You know, they really nourish you with distinction, with something that empowers you in a very pure way. And not in a way that you have to, like, go to a whole retreat, you know, and get bombarded with all this belief system until you harvest some gold of being centered for 5 minutes. So really start facing this place where you get nourished in a pure way without all the drama and the bullshit and the beliefs, and just getting the distinctions that can empower you. Distinction happen in all the 5 bodies, not only, you know, intellectually. Hope you got something out of this video. See you next time.